Hello and welcome. Thank God for Facebook. Practice the resurrection. Practice the resurrection. You know, I wasn't always the most confident person. As a youth, I was impetuous but kind of shy, kind of modest. Modest? I know, me. But maybe my senior year, maybe a little bit after that, I thought, you know what? I'm going to pretend to be confident. I'm going to act as if I'm confident. And I did that. And not arrogant, but sort of I made an agreement with myself that when people complimented me or said something nice to me, instead of correcting them, you play guitar well. Instead of saying, no, I stink, I would say, thank you. I practice like 3 hours a day for the last 2 years, so hopefully I'm getting there. So I thought, I'll act as if I have some confidence in some things. I'll sort of honestly agree with people when they compliment me in ways that I feel confident. So I acted confident, and this thing happened after a few years where I became confident. I sort of started believing that the good attributes that I had were true, actually existed. And I thought, I'm really not that bad of a person. And I started to think, aesthetics matter. The way things appear, the way you appear, matters. And I know what you're thinking. Wow, what a crazy and original thought. But it's not really that original of a thought. I hate to correct you there. But Jesus was sort of hinting at this idea. And he hinted at it a lot on the Sermon on the Mount. He sort of talked about different ways that we could act and how that would change the way our mind worked. He talked about, if you've looked on a woman with lust in your eyes, you've already committed adultery. He talked about cutting off your hand if your hand would offend you and send you to hell. So he talked about ways you could control your action, control your mind by first changing the way you act. And that's a wonderful thought. This idea that we can change the way we think. And that's where practicing in the resurrection comes into play. You see, we heard about the resurrection last week in celebration of Easter. And what was the resurrection? Well, it had significance for our salvation, but it was also symbolic because it represented the flesh being overcome by the Spirit. Jesus came down, God manifest in the flesh, and overcame the flesh. So he was doing it to show us that we could overcome the flesh in the Spirit, that we could change the way that we feel and think by changing our actions. Now, this thing is important, and I think as Christians, often we think that, I'm going to do that spiritually in my life. I'm going to change the way I feel spiritually about things, but we don't practice it in our daily life. We have this idea that we can make this broad change in our lives without first changing the little things, without changing the way we behave on a daily basis. I've been reading in Leviticus a lot this week. And you're thinking, Leviticus, that's some exciting reading, right? Well, it's not always the most exciting stuff, but it's incredibly valuable. Because in Leviticus, God, through Moses, made a bunch of rules, or he sort of published a bunch of rules for the children of Israel. And we know that in the Old Testament was about a group salvation by God. Sort of the children of Israel, chosen people's way to salvation. The New Testament, after Jesus came and sacrificed himself, was about the salvation of the individual. It went from being this chosen people could be saved to being you could be saved. I can be saved. So what happened in Leviticus is there'd be a bunch of different rules. Like there would be, what you can eat, how you can handle sick people. It could be who you can marry. It's a bunch of different things. And what Jesus was saying when he said, I come not to condemn the law, but to fulfill it. What he was saying is that we're going to get to the heart of the matter. Those laws had a purpose. There was a moral to those laws, and I'm going to fulfill them in you. And when we're living up to the moral of the law, we have to look at these old laws and think, what were these about? What was the purpose of these things? And the rules on what you were supposed to eat, those probably had a purpose towards keeping God's people healthy and able-bodied to do the work of God. Or maybe the people that they could marry, or the way they were supposed to treat each other, sort of the way you could have a moral, upright society, the way you could foster love by treating each other with kindness. And there's all these different rules that had morals to them. So we should look at these morals in the Old Testament and say, how can I enact that in my daily life? How can I live up to those things? So when I think about all the rules for the food and what they should put in, I say, well, health should be important for the child of God. And it should be something where I'm not limiting what I can do for God by my health. And I start talking about these things, and maybe people get angry. They say, oh, the skinny boy wants to tell people. But you know what? It's easy for me to tell people what they should eat. Maybe they're not seeing my belly sit over my jeans right now, or they're not hearing me snore when I lay on my back, so they think I'm a skinny boy. Well, you know what? There's some things that I don't do right with health. It's easy for me to tell you what you do wrong, but if I start thinking about myself, sleep. I don't sleep enough. Maybe I need to consider how this little change can change the way that my life is going forward, and that little change from the flesh, my desire to stay up late all night and get 4 hours of sleep, maybe I can overcome that desire and do what's right, to overcome the flesh with the Spirit. And then you talk about, I was reading in Leviticus, and there's all these rules about what could be sacrificed. They said no bruised or damaged animals could be given as an acceptable sacrifice. Well, what does that mean? That means that the best belongs to God, that the children of Israel were not supposed to bring their weak and damaged cattle as an acceptable sacrifice. No, you give the best to God because He is giving you everything that you have. So as a child of God, I take that moral to be that I need to give God my best. I can't just give Him the last 5 minutes of the day when I'm tired and exhausted and say, this is when I'm going to pray, or this is when I'll read the Bible. I need to take from the good of my day. I need to give Him my high effort. And I need to do what I can in my daily life. And when you make those little decisions on how you live your life, then you can start to see a total spiritual awakening in your overall life. But we can't be too good for the little changes. And that's why we have to practice in the resurrection. Because we want to be resurrected to be with Him when we go or when He comes back. But first, I need to practice in that resurrection by doing it in my day-to-day life. God bless. I hope you're taking care of yourself. I hope you're praying for me. I'm praying for you. Love you.